This chapter will have no introduction. There is none that is needed. Let the madness come in.
Chapter 11. The Queen of Hearts and Roses Red. The door closed quickly behind David. Before disappearing, however, David could hear one last time the sound of the Hatter's cackle fading slowly out. The door was gone, the sands were blistering, and a sense of dread fell over him in that time. Alone, alone, all alone. Alone on a wide, wide sea. And never a kind saint took pity on my soul in agony. David recalled the quote from a ballad that he remembered from a book full of such stories that made its way into his mind. It was, as he recalled, a quote from a Romanticism-era ballad in particular, known as Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. The tale told of a ghost ship, a mariner whose choices haunt him gravely, and a moral of respect nature and all of God's creations. David wondered, then, about the Hatter and the rabbit. Were they God's creations? Or did anyone in fact create them? Or had they rather existed a time before, when fact and fiction commingled in the old legends passed from generation to generation, only to end in disappointing finality in the modern age, simply because these stories do not add up to only logical, real conclusions? It is impossible to say if this was true, but David would soon learn that it was not an exile on reality, but rather an exile on sanity. For you see, dear reader, listener, mind you, sanity controls what exactly reality constitutes. When you remove one's sanity, reality can become, why, anything. Any concept that you can imagine. It all becomes reality. Anything you can imagine suddenly becomes possible. It's only when sanity leaves that true madness can sprout. David could see nothing through the raging sands that swirled angrily around him. So being alone, and seeing nothing in sight for miles, David did the only thing that he saw fit to do. He started to walk. He walked and walked for what seemed like an eternity. He walked and walked until his feet could walk no more. David collapsed to the ground, exhausted from what must have been hours of scorching heat. Exhaustion carried with it the promise of sleep, something David could not even begin to think about. The sun, at least David assumed it to be the sun, seemed to be setting over the horizon, and it was in watching the sun setting over the red wastelands that he saw it. It was a building, a castle, that was badly torn up, stones falling off the side every so often. As he approached, he noticed that the sand was becoming less violent the closer he came to the structure. He reached the entrance finally. Two gargantuan doors with heart-shaped handles stood in front of David, and upon grabbing the knockers and banging it against the wood, the sand abruptly stopped swirling altogether and fell to the ground. A highly authoritative voice then shouted,
Who goes there? Who dares to enter the domain of Her Royal Great Good Majesty, the Queen of Hearts?
David could not find the source of the voice, so he resented and responded,
My name's David. I am awfully confused. Could I please come in? I've been walking for what seems like hours. I just don't think I could go on anymore right now.
The voice was quiet for a moment before it responded.
Very well. You may enter.
Immediately, the two large doors swung open, revealing another palace. In fact, this palace reminded him very much of the Hatter's palace. It had the same red oak doors attached to the front, and the same gleaming gold handles. David entered the large lobby of the castle and looked for any signs of life, but could find none to be found in the immaculate room. He continued toward the center room of the palace when he began to hear a faint sound coming from the room to his left. As he neared, he discerned that it was music. Slow, chilling music. It was a piano, playing a snatch of unnerving notes. The tune was simple, yet it sent shivers up the boy's spine. He was all alone, in some far-off land, cut off from any known exit. Cut off from home. David put his hand on the door, and as he did, the music stopped. He was unnerved by the silence, which was broken by the loud creaking of the hinges on the oak doors. He entered into what appeared to be a throne room. A very familiar throne room. It was, in fact, almost a carbon copy of the Hatter's immaculate castle. Slight changes in color were here and there, and rather than clocks and teapots, hearts and spades were everywhere. Hearts of every size and shape decorated everything in sight, just as the clocks and teapots had with the Hatters. Looking to the throne, David saw her. A woman with a larger-than-life head and a complexion that would make a French mime blush. Her facial features were just as large, stretched out, and very ugly. She wore a marvelous dress adorned with black spades and red hearts, but in a very certain design. And upon thinking about it, it came back to him. It was, in fact, the design from the doors that led the Hatter to throw him into this place. The one from which the enormous rattling had come from. Upon her enormous head was a ruby-red crown, shimmering in the faint light that managed to hit the throne at just the right angle.
What do you want, boy?
She asked deviantly.
Hello, my name is Dave.
I know full well who you are, foolish child. Everyone here will, you come to find. Yes, I can smell it. You've come from there, haven't you?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know where there is.
Why? The Hatter's Palace. Is that not how you come upon these wastelands?
David was shocked. How did this stranger know all of this? After all, David had been alone for literally hours before coming upon this place.
David, dear, do not be frightened. I am not your enemy. Surely you have become acquainted with the Mad Hatter?
She asked. He nodded, and she continued.
And the cat?
Another nod. She sighed, then paused.
Did you meet anybody else?
Yes, there was a white rabbit in a waistcoat.
The woman cut him off with the excited clapping of her hands in glee at the boy's words.
Oh, wonderful. This is great good news indeed. My dear little friend is all right.
Yes, he helped me, or at least he tried. He tried to get me not thrown in here, but...
But? What do you mean, but? Is he all right or not? Answer me!
She screamed.
I don't know. He was fine before they threw me in here, but the Hatter was very angry at him, it seemed.
The large-headed woman was visibly frustrated, beginning to pace back and forth.
I swear it. If that fiend laid even a single hand on my dear rabbit, I will have his head! Guards!
She screeched. Two very bulky guard guards ran quickly into the room. She whispered something to them both. They nodded and left the room. The woman then turned her large head to David, straightened out her dress, and said,
Excuse my manners, child. I am the Queen of Hearts and Roses Red. Welcome to the remnants of my kingdom.
Remnants?
What you see here is the Red Wasteland, a terrain of blistering sandstorms and other dangerous things. This forsaken land is the accursed place that he forced me into. He was somehow able to break his bonds and overthrow my court. He's probably redecorated the whole damn place to have those tacky clocks and teapots everywhere.
David struggled to stifle a laugh. The Queen continued.
The immaculate palace that serves as the ruling place for all of Wonderland did belong to me. That lunatic took that away from me. I am going to get it back. But I cannot do it alone. So, I will present you with this choice, David. Join me and help reclaim my throne, or I will have your head! Sound fair? Sounds fair. Cherry hearts, anybody?
And just how do I know that I can trust you in the slightest? You seem just as mad as anything else down here.
The Queen was just in the process of jamming a tart into her mouth when she stopped. She looked at the boy and smiled another devilish grin.
Oh, dear, sweet, naive little David. We're all mad down here. Welcome to Wonderland, dearie.
David was not surprised at the brashness of the Queen, as something in his head told him that this character would be doing that quite often. He would come to expect the same level of madness from the other frenemies that he would encounter. Yes, that was a good word for them. Frenemies. That was the best he could come up with to call these people. he neither could trust nor distrust them. Confused by that? Great! All he knew was that the Hatter needed to be stopped, if for not another reason than to escape this fever dream of a place. As if sensing the boy's mind, the Queen spoke up.
Even if you did not want to help me or trust me, I'm afraid you have simply no choice. You see, if you ever wish to escape, then you must gain a secret password to the door between. So, you wrap it up. You don't help me. And you are stuck as much here as I am.
There is only one way home?
Indeed, yes. I'm afraid you will have to trust me if you wish to escape our beloved land.
She scoffed at him.
Smart Alec. Just how crazy are these beings?
Beings. That was a good word for them now. They were not mortal, not people, that much was obvious. And David's thought of this was confirmed with the small white hand that came crashing across the side of his face only seconds after thinking the thought. The Queen then shouted,
I've heard that, you slimy little miscreant! How dare you disrespect royalty to its illustrious face? Do it again, and it'll be more than a hand.
David rubbed his cheek, shocked on some level and expecting this sort of illogical happening on another. He then chuckled lightly and smirked.
Cheeky little trick that. Reading my thoughts, that is.
The Queen blushed at these words, as if she impressed herself more than anybody else that she intended to do so with. David was unimpressed, however, and simply wrote it off in his head to
Not to think too much around that one.
The Queen grinned devilishly, staring at David at the foot of her throne. She smiled, knowing that her perfect champion had finally arrived. Next month, Chapter 12. Having come across the titular Queen of Hearts and all the madness therein, the race is now on to find a way to reclaim the Queen's mantle, defeat the deadly Mad Hatter, and most importantly, find a way out of this damned place. The plot thickens as David allies himself with the Queen of Hearts and whomever she may see fit to call upon. But is David walking into a deliberate trap? Find out as we fall further down the rabbit hole in next month's riveting entry, Chapter 12. The Duchess of Anemone's White and Things of Delight. Introducing our newest narrator, Mother Creepypasta.
Until then.